Well, hello again everyone, Paul here in the RoJoBe Music Workshop. Welcome to part 2 of the Mountain Dulcimer project. Okay, so if you look behind me here, you can see it's coming together. It's got it all clamped up at the moment, gluing. Now, the problem with this is, because of the shape of it and the size and everything else, the building of this part, basically the sides, is proving to be a real faff. Basically, I can only really attach one of these panels at a time. Partly due to not having enough clamps to do more than one at a time, but also even if I did have enough clamps, to try to put two together and hold it all in place and clamp it, and it's just an absolute nightmare. It's just not really possible to do. So I'm literally having to do it one panel at a time. And there's 8 panels plus the 2 end pieces, end blocks, and in every corner there's bracing as well. So I've got to do those separately as well. I've been doing this now for 3 days. 3 days! It's an absolute nightmare. And you know, because like I said, I'm having to do it one panel at a time and then do one brace at a time, and you know, you can see just from the jig I've got here, clamps all over the place. It's clamped to the table, it's got spacers, and it's clamped here and clamped there, and it's just what a ball ache. It really has been a complete nightmare. And as I said, I've been on it 3 days now and it's still not finished. I've still got a couple of pieces to glue in place. So will I get it finished today? I don't know. It's gone 4:30 already. So you know, the problem is I'm having to clamp it up with the glue on, wait for the glue to dry before I can move on to the next stage. Now I'm using I haven't got it to hand. I'm using Titebond Original wood glue, which is, you know, pretty much the best wood glue out there, in my opinion. And for it to set hard, I mean completely set, you know, it's several hours. You can, depending on your workpiece, you can clamp something up, leave it for about 20 minutes, and it will be set good enough to be able to take the clamps off and to move it around. You wouldn't be able to work on that piece at that time because the glue wouldn't be set enough. But after about 20 minutes, you can, if you need to, you can unclamp it, you know, move it around and do something else on it. I mean, it's fantastic glue. It sets really, really well, and it's quite easy to remove if you need to. You heat it up and slide a knife or something in between the joint to remove the glue. So already 3 days, and as I said, it's not finished yet. So what I'm doing between, you know, when I clamp a bit up and I've, you know, got to let the glue dry, I've been doing other things between that while the glue's drying, and you know, I've been getting on with other parts. Mostly the neck and the headstock. So made quite a bit of progress on this actually. So I've already got the pilot holes drilled for the tuning pegs. I'll come back to that in a minute. And I've cut out the slot in the middle, and I've also carved a scroll by hand, both sides, and that was quite a job actually. I used a series of methods to do that, including small hand chisels, small drills. I use my soldering iron to burn a channel into it, and none of that was really working very well, but by that time I had a kind of a groove going around. So I put it in my workbench, clamped it up in my workbench, and I did this with my router in the end. My light's going a bit funny. So yeah, I cut it out with my router, and I spent a lot of time sanding the neck and the headstock, sanding and more sanding, and filing and rasping and drilling, and oh my god, it's been quite a lot of work. It's almost finished, but not quite. It still needs a bit of sanding. For the I mean, this surface is going to be the fretboard, and sand each side as well. Not the underside, because that's going to be glued to the top of the instrument, so I don't need to sand that. But the headstock itself, I mean, I've smoothed all of the edges with files and rasps and sandpaper, and I mean this actually was quite a job. I had to drill large holes, 1, 2, 3, with a spade drill bit. That was a bit scary, and final shaping with rasps and files and sandpaper. And you can see that the edges, the two sides, they're quite thin. They're about 5 or 6 millimeters thereabouts. And this gap, I mean, you can see I can get my fingers in and wriggle them about, so it's quite a big gap in there. Now I deliberately made it like that because when it comes to stringing it up, I mean, the pegs are going to be going through here, and there'll be a hole in the middle, put the string in there and wind it around. So I want room in here so I can get my fingers in there, because it can be really fiddly if you don't have much room in there. Anyone who's ever worked on violins or classical guitars even that have got the 2 slots will know that sometimes it can be a bit fiddly. So I wanted to give myself plenty of room. So, but these, although they're only 5 or 6 mil thick, give plenty strong enough. And you'll see that on this side, this hole and this hole are larger than this hole and this hole. And then flip it around, and it's the lower 2 that are bigger because they're tapered. So I've drilled the holes and using my reaming tool, I've tapered the holes. Okay, so this is, as I've said before, this is a proper reaming tool specifically for jobs like this, for reaming holes, tapered holes, for tuning pegs. So, as I said in the last video, I want to hand make as much of this instrument as possible. So I'm not using factory tuners, I'm making my own. Now, this instrument here, which is my sanshin, oops, there goes the bridge, Japanese sanshin, and you can see it just comes in kit form. The neck slides into the holes in the body, and then it's held together with tension basically. Now, with this instrument, doesn't have the pegs in here at the moment, but you can see it's similar things. So we've got small, large, small, large, small, large, because these also are tapered friction tuning pegs. And 1, 2, 3. So these are the tuning pegs. So you can see they're tapered, and you've got the hole there for the string, and they just wedge in, just like violin tuners. So there's 3 of them for this instrument. Now, you'll also see, I'm sure, that the end of them is very thin, and obviously, as such, quite fragile. So one of them did actually snap. It was this one, and I don't know if you can see that, but I repaired it. So it snapped. The end of it snapped off. So I removed this whole piece and then drilled a hole in there, put a piece of dowel in there, and then shaped it. It's not perfect, but it works, and it pretty much looks the same as all the others. I mean, the handle is still the same. As I said, I drilled a hole and put a piece of dowel in there and tapered it. But I wasn't sure if it would hold up. So I decided to actually make another one. So I made another one here. And if I hold that against one of the original ones, you can see it's slightly thicker, and you know that part of it is slightly different, but it's pretty much the same. So I made that one, and I made another one as well as a spare. So I've got the 3 original ones, these 3, plus 2 spares, or you know, I can use any of these. So I made these 2 by hand before I had my lathe. So I basically hand carved them out of just a square stock piece of wood, hand carved them with a knife, and you know, the final bit with sandpaper and everything. It took me quite a while to make them, but it was very satisfying because it worked really well. But it was whilst doing that I decided I need a lathe. Because it was quite time consuming. I mean, each one probably took, I would say, an hour or more to make. Now on the lathe that would have been, you know, 15-20 minutes maximum. So that was when I decided I needed to get a lathe. So I'm going to be making ones very much like this for this one. So if I just place these ones in here just to show you kind of what it's going to look like. These ones are a bit loose fitting in there, but just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. Okay, so like that, but not this colour. This matches the colour of my sand shin. So they won't be that colour, and they probably won't be that long either. I do have some other doweling that I'm going to be making them from. So that's kind of what it's going to look like. I quite like it myself. You know, I could go with the just ordinary type tuners, but I think this will look much nicer. Now, the only reservations I have with this setup, I mean, the ones I'm going to make will be thicker than this anyway. As I said, the only reservations I have with these is this is going to be strung with steel strings. So these friction tuners need to work really, really well. They need to be a perfect fit. The taper needs to be perfectly matched between the pegs and the tapered holes in here. Excuse me. And as I said, it's going to be strung with steel strings. So this sand shin has nylon strings. Now the tension on steel strings is far greater than nylon strings. So my concern, although I'm not overly concerned, is that they may not hold, the friction tuners may not hold the tension of steel strings. They might keep coming loose. Having said that, that's exactly the way violins are made and the other instruments in the violin family, and they're strung with steel strings. And I mean, a violin neck is not even half of this length, probably a third of the length of this, of the entire neck of a violin. And they're strung high, GDAE on a violin, which is the same as the mandolin. So that's quite high tension, and they hold just fine. And they have, I mean, you know, violins have been made that way for what, 400 years, a bit more, and they seem just fine. So maybe that's not going to be a problem. My only other concern is, as I said, these ones are quite thin. The ones I'm going to make for this will be thicker. So, you know, they could either come loose, or worst case scenario, it could actually snap in the middle with the tension pulling on there. It could snap, but again, I don't think so, because it's how violins are made. So I'm not overly concerned. It's at the back of my mind that, you know, these are possibilities, and I might need to do something to overcome those problems. And I have been measuring up, in case I had to fit just ordinary factory tuners, classical guitar style tuners, which would be the same thing, so that your post would go through here, but the tuning pegs would be kind of out the back. Now, I run into problems with that, namely here, if I have a tuning peg here, it's going to come out to here, and it's not going to get past here to turn it. And I can't get rid of that, because that's what's going to butt up against the body. That's going to give it a lot of strength. And so if I have the tuners coming out the back, the top three would be fine, but this bottom one would, you know, the tuning peg would hit against here, so that wouldn't work. I could mount them the other way, so that they come out the top. And again, this one would be fine, that would be fine, that would be fine, but this one. So those are not going to work. So these friction tuners must work. They have to. It's law, okay? So what I'm going to do now, because this is, you know, the glue is still drying on this. I can't do any more to it at the moment. So I'm at the stage now where I'm going to mark the fretboard and cut the fret slots with my template here. So this is a template for 25.5 inch scale, 24 frets. So this is for you know, guitar or anything like that. But with these dulcimers, you don't have the same amount of frets as you do in a guitar. So where I've got a cross on some of these frets, those are the ones you omit. Okay, so example, you omit number 1 and you have number 2. So this on the dulcimer is the first fret. Then you omit number 3 and you have number 4, and so on. So it's yeah. So this old chestnut. So this is the same. This has exactly the same kind of fretboard, albeit a bit smaller. And so you can see on here unlike a guitar where the frets are evenly spaced and get progressively close together up the neck, on these it's different, because you skip some of the frets, because you basically have a do-re-mi scale. It's called a diatonic scale, as opposed to a guitar which has a chromatic scale. So this dulcimer is going to be fretted exactly the same as this, but this is a 21 inch scale. This is going to be a 25.5 inch scale, so the frets will be further apart because the fretboard is longer. And DAD, this dulcimer is going to be tuned exactly the same, but it's the high D is going to have a double D, if you like. So as I said, this is the template for marking and cutting the fret slots. Now you can find on the internet fret spacing diagrams and instructions. and you can measure it. But like I said, I bought a kit with about a dozen of these in and many other bits and pieces, and it's just so much simpler because you literally just mark where the lines are, and at the top you've got your mark for where the nut goes. So it's really crucial that you get this part right. So when you're measuring and marking the frets, so this will be the nut, and it's a 25.5 inch scale. Now what that means is you measure from, let's get a little pointer, you measure from this side of the nut, so the inside of the nut, all the way down the fretboard to, it's not on here, but the inside of the bridge or saddle. So your scale length is from the inside, this side of the nut, to the inside, this side of the bridge or the saddle. So this is not 25.5 inches, because you would have to go a bit longer for where the bridge will sit. And that's important for intonation. And that's why when I made this, some of you who've seen my recent videos will know that this bridge is floating, which means I can move the bridge up and down to adjust the intonation. Now with these, you generally have a fixed bridge, so it's absolutely crucial that I get this scale and the frets perfect. And when it comes to it, I'm going to be fitting the bridge or the saddle quite late on in the project. That's going to be one of the last things that I do. And obviously I'll show you in that video how I make sure I get it in the right position, because once I do, it's going to be fixed in place. It's not going to be a floating bridge. I like a floating bridge. I'm used to it from my banjolays, my Thai style instrument, which is also tuned as a dulcimer. I like a floating bridge because you can always adjust the intonation easier. I mean, you can adjust intonation on a fixed bridge as well, but it's just so much easier when the bridge moves. Okay, so enough faffing. Let's get down to marking the fretboard. So, tools I'm going to need for this job are a neck, a fret scale, or fret template I should say, a fret saw and the jig, mitre box, fret saw mitre box it's called. So it's quite simple. You put your neck, mark all your frets first using your template. So mark where all of your frets go down your fretboard, and then you put it into this jig, line it up, and you cut your frets. Now I'm going to be able to do most of the frets perfectly well in this jig, but when I start at the very beginning, the top, so I'm not going to be able to do the first fret with this jig. I mean, the problem is if I try to mount it like this, it's just not going to work. So I'm going to do the first one with a set square. I can still mark it with my template, mark a straight line with this, with the set square, and then cut it. So, and then I can do all of the rest with my mitre box, and luckily it just fits in there nicely. So I can do all of my frets with this gizmo. Okay, so the first part is to actually mark where all of the frets are going to go. Now this part is the most crucial part. This is where you've got to get it perfect. So you can see here I've got a step down, because originally I was going to fit a fretboard to this, but I decided not to in the end. I decided to just cut the frets directly into the wood itself, like I did with the other Dulcimer, and it works perfectly well. But because of the design of this headstock, I had to make sure that I've got the right angle with the strings coming up and then down over onto the tuners. And also I have put all of those tuning pegs in and lined up where the strings are going to go to make sure they don't hit each other and interfere with each other. And even if they do, there's only going to be one that will do that, and if it does, I've got a plan of how to overcome that, and it's fairly simple. So I've got a little step down here. Now the nut needs to be pretty close to that, if not right on it really, because if you have the nut too far back, then the string comes down here, it's going to be touching here, and then it's going to go over here, and it's not going to work. So the nut needs to be pretty much at the top. So I measured it at first, and I thought, should I have the nut right on the end, like that, right on the end? But I thought, no, I can bring it back a little bit, so I've got a bit of a gap, like that. So I'm going to be marking this line, which is the inside of the nut. I'm going to be marking that, and then all of the frets. I don't need to mark this edge, because that doesn't really matter. It's this inside edge that matters. So, first thing I want to do is, with a bit of tape, just tape the template in place to hold it still and